Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at one of three stakes events on Saturday at Aqueduct. Race 6 is the Toboggan Stakes, going the 7 furlong distance for the older males. And Mike, this might be one of the more interesting races on the Saturday card because the stakes action came up a little thinner than I think they might have hoped. And this actually drew a pretty interesting group of 7 runners. We've got a few coming out of the Gravesend, the local prep for this, as well as Coastal Mission is dropping out of the Cigar Mile.
Yeah, exactly. The Gravesend feels like a pretty good starting point for this race, David. Maybe, go there, look at those 3 horses who I think are all major players in here. Coastal Mission, you mentioned makes a lot of sense in this race. You got Castle Chaos, who, ran some really nice races against good horses last year. He's back from a layoff in this race. So, yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Maybe the biggest wild card in this field is the number 6 Nelson Avenue, coming out of a blowout victory at Parks where he went gate to wire. And speaking of Nelson Avenue, we'll take a look at the Timeform US pace projector to see if he can get away with an easy lead once again. And I guess it's possible because the number 1 Maximus Meridius certainly has plenty of tactical speed, but he's not the kind of horse that they're always intent on getting to the front with. And then you've got the number 7 Gunnet to the outside, who on occasion decides he's a speed horse, but doesn't always look quick enough to make the front. So I could see Nelson Avenue making the lead once again.
Yeah, I can too. If nothing else, it didn't seem like they're going to be blazing up front in this race. I guess we'll see how they decide to play it with the horse on the rail, Maximus Meridius. He is a rateable horse. He doesn't need the lead, but he's got speed if they decide to use it from the rail.
Let's start our conversation of the contenders with that number 1 Maximus Meridius, taking a look at his most recent start. We mentioned the Gravesend being one of the keys to handicapping this race. Here's the replay of the stretch run of the Gravesend, where Full Moon Madness made this move between horses around the far turn, challenged Maximus Meridius at the quarter pole. And I thought Maximus Meridius was pretty game to battle back and turn away that challenge in deep stretch. Obviously, these top 2 had no trouble handling the sloppy sealed track on this occasion. Running Son of a Gun is the horse that is staying on late for third. We'll get to him in a little bit. Mike, Maximus Meridius has just been really good over his past 3 starts. They've been a little bit more aggressive with him after they took him back and it did not work out in that Gallant Bob back in September of last year. But I think they figured out a better way to ride him the last 3 times. Maybe the question with him is the stretch out to 7 furlongs, because I do have some concerns about distance with this horse.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I'm not sure, which way I would lean. At this point, David, I don't feel like it's fair to just look at his overall form and say that 7 furlongs isn't a great distance for him. Maybe it's not, but we'll see. The 2 times that they tried it, one of them was to Woody Stevens. He was just never going to win that race. The other one was to Bayshore, and I realized he only got a 76 buyer in that race and blew a clear stretch lead. He ran great in there, in my opinion. Maybe you disagree with that. I thought he ran great in there. That pace is way faster than it looks. He was surrounded by closers at the end of that race. I just based on those 2 races, I'm not ready to say that 7 furlongs is too far from him. I liked his Gravesend. I'm not so sure that the race he ran in 2 back, I know it was at Mahoning Valley. I'm not sure that field wasn't better than this one. And I personally think he was an unlucky loser in that race. I think there's a way to look at the trip he got in there and say he was unlucky not to beat that field.
The number 2 Full Moon Madness is that horse that challenged Maximus Meridius, an upper stretch of the Gravesend that ultimately got turned away by that foe. And Mike, I wonder what you make of that race, because he obviously wasn't the quickest away from the gate, got into a good stalking position. They made that early move, and it looked at the quarter pole like he was going to be able to take that race over. Obviously, could never really get by Maximus Meridius. It was a step in the right direction, second off the layoff. I wonder if we're going to see more upside from this horse, though.
I'm worried about that, too. I'll just say that his Gravesend, I think he ran really well in there. He got bumped pretty hard at the start, I thought, and that's why maybe he was a little bit out of position, but he made a pretty bold move there off the quarter pole. He was going shoulder to shoulder with Maximus Meridius, who I think is a pretty good horse, and he just came out second best, but I still think he ran well. I think all 3 of the horses exiting the Gravesend ran really well, and I just think they're the sort of major focal point, for me at least, in this race, David, coming back. I've always felt like Full Moon Madness was good. I always felt like he had potential, and I think maybe he's starting to deliver on it.
The number 3 is Castle Chaos, who got really good in the winter of last year, actually just barely lost the Carter handicap earlier in the spring of 2024 to post time. Did get a way better trip than post time on that occasion and still got run down by that hard-knocking runner from Maryland. since then, Mike, the form has kind of gone in the wrong direction for Castle Chaos. I guess he didn't run that badly in the Metropolitan Handicap, but that was a pretty thin field behind National Treasure. And then he came back at Saratoga for a couple of optional claiming tries, and each one was a little worse than the prior one. So now he's coming off a layoff. Feels like this is a horse that got really good for a window of time, and I wonder if he can recapture that form.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to. And the other thing about him, listen, he's got races against some really good horses that obviously make him a really strong contender in here if he can run it. Personally, I've never been a big fan of his, but I recognize that he's got races that will make him tough in here. I also feel like it's interesting to at least note that he's been pretty good off of layoffs throughout his career here. So, maybe he'll be ready to fire here off the bench. I think he's dangerous, but I don't love him.
The number 4 Coastal Mission is the horse that I made the lukewarm morning line favorite. It's just really hard to knock any of his form, Mike. I mean, he's just so consistent. He shows up, tries hard every time. Yeah, he wasn't quite good enough against the field that showed up in the last couple of editions of the Cigar Mile at the end of 2023 and 2024. But all of his surrounding races would make him a major player in here. And honestly, watching his most recent start, when he tried the Cigar Mile, he didn't even run that badly behind those horses. Wide on the turn, I thought the jockey made a bit of a tactical error angling to the inside in the stretch, lost a little bit of momentum. And then you take into consideration his record at this distance, 7 furlongs. I know a lot of the 7 for 10 record in the career box was compiled at Charlestown, but you take a look at the 2 7 furlong races around one turn at Laurel and at Aqueduct in July of last year when he chased home Mulligan, just races that put him right in the mix against a group like this.
Yeah, they're exactly. He just seems like he's a perfect 7 to 8 furlong one turn kind of horse here. So the 7 furlongs is great for him. I'm with you on his Cigar Mile. I didn't like him much in that race, but he actually ran pretty well in there. I feel like he'll take money in here though, David. You mentioned you made him a lukewarm morning line favorite. I don't think I'd be willing to take a short price on him because I'm not sure he has such a huge edge on several of his rivals in this race. And then just going back, you got to find ways to split hairs anyway. He won the 49er 2 starts back. It's not a race that excites me at all. We got 2 of the 1-2 finishers coming back in this race, and I'm kind of taking the position that I want to stand against those 2 horses.
The number 5, Runningonofagun, was in that Gravesend replay that we showed earlier. He was chasing home the top 2, ultimately getting up for 3rd that day. I thought he put in a pretty game effort, Mike, because it looked on the turn like maybe he was going nowhere. And once he got into the clear in the stretch, he really was kind of lengthening his stride and finishing best of all across the wire. That's kind of this horse's MO. He's always finishing well at the ends of his races. I found his fall highway 2-back to be a pretty encouraging effort because he got out of the gate much better and was way more aggressive than he had been in some prior starts. And just felt like he really battled Giant Mischief, the winner of that race, all the way to the wire. And I think Giant Mischief might be a pretty talented runner for the Brad Cox barn. This horse finally got back into top form after needing a lot of time to kind of get back into the swing of things following a long layoff from 2023 into 2024. I think he fits well against this field, and I'm not really concerned about him stretching out to the 7 furlongs.
I'm not either. I'll be interested too, David, to see how they bet him in this race. To me, he was always a horse who was kind of underrated, and you could always rely on him to put in a good effort at a price. They finally bet him pretty hard last time, and I did think he ran pretty well in there. As you could see, Rosario, he was just trying to edge off the rail throughout the entire stretch run there. And it just took him a while to finally get this horse into the clear. When he did, Runningonofagun did what he always does. And he really ran at the end of this race. This horse, he's dangerous in here.
Mike, I want to know what you make of the number 6 Nelson Avenue and horses like this who have one effort that kind of jumps off the page at you. His 101 Beyer performance in the Blitzen Stakes last time at Parks. We'll take a look at the replay of that race, and he was visually impressive. Just opening up on this field, you're going to see he's geared down in the final 16th of a mile after he had already put the rivals away on this day. It's not like his form prior to this was terrible, but it didn't live up to the lofty expectations that he's promising based on this performance. And just, do you think he can repeat it? And were you impressed by this effort at all?
I was impressed by it, to be sure. It didn't make me, feel like, oh, let's get this horse back to New York and run him in a really good stakes race. I mean, listen, he's got, you've already mentioned it, David, he's got other races that make him competitive anyway. But again, I'm not betting him off of that race, especially if he takes money in here. And I've already sort of tipped my hand a little bit anyway. I don't really like that 49er 3 starts back, even though he was a pretty good second in there. I don't like that race necessarily. And I'm just he's one of the horses in there. I'm hoping that people do buy into that last race and actually throw some money at this horse.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm looking at the Timeform USPPs for that last race. That day at Parks has the red color coding, which indicates an extreme speed bias. And kind of looking through the charts, even in Formulator, a lot of speed won throughout the day. There was another race right, I think, before this one by Irish Maxima Philly, who got a similar speed figure upgrade over her prior form. A horse early in the day, a $15,000 claimer, got a 100 buyer for Jamie Ness, winning by 26 lengths. So feels like a day that speed was really enhanced based on the racetrack. The number 7 is Gun It, and he's coming off a victory as well over a sloppy track. His win came last time out at Aqueduct, where he beat Optional Claiming Company, and a rare visit to the winner's circle for this 9-year-old who does run some nice races still at his advanced age, but just doesn't get the job done that often. And the bettors didn't see it coming last time as he got the job done at 16-1. Still only got an 87 buyer though, Mike, and it feels like even on his best form, if he could somehow get back to it, this would be a little bit of a stretch for him.
Yeah, I'm a Gun It fan. He's not an easy horse to read, and he's not the kind of horse I've ever wanted to bet in stakes races of any kind.
Let's throw up our picks for this toboggan on Saturday at Aqueduct. And Mike, you're going to go back to the Gravesend winner, the horse on the rail, Maximus Meridius.
I just think this is another good spot for him, David. And I know it was close in the Gravesend. I still thought he ran really, really well in there. To me, he is still a horse I can project some upside for as well. So I'm not sure that we've seen his best race yet. I think there's a good trip coming from the rail. I'm going right back to those Gravesend horses. So I think all three of them are going to be major contenders in here.
Yeah, and I put the number 5, Runningonofagun, on top. I just thought he might be the best price this time of the horses coming out of the Gravesend. And I just thought watching the last race, he didn't really get going until the late stages when the running was already the race was already kind of decided. Stretching back out to the 7 furlongs with the 2 speeds to the outside, maybe Ruben Silvera can slot out and just get him the stalking trip that he used successfully the 2 times prior to that. So the number 5, Runningonofagun for me. The number 1, Maximus Meridius for Mike in the Toboggan Stakes on Saturday at Aqueduct. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.